Anand, your thoughts on this competitive situation between exchanges, which seem to be the only reason why we have this extended trading business in the first place. There doesn't seem to be any other cogent reason aside of the fact that two exchanges are competing for business and therefore they're trying to push the boundaries of starting trade earlier or extending it later.
Well, then I'll just take a couple of minutes. I think there are two issues here. It is not only competition between exchanges, but also competition between regulators. Why, for example, did SEBI have to increase it from 9 to 5 is the first question you have to ask. Especially as Anish mentioned just now, the biggest issue that we face as brokers, and this is something that is not an emotional issue, it is simply an issue of doing business, is that banks are open only from 10 to 3. So if you have a situation where after, let's say, 3 o'clock, you have a sharp movement in the market and you need to collect a margin, and the market opens the next day before the banks are open, how are you supposed to collect the margins in the first place? And how is the banking system going to facilitate you to even clear a check? Even if you were to try and say, look, I have the check in my hand, how is it going to get cleared if I don't have a system which can bank? Without that in place, I do not know why SEBI should allow. In fact, actually, between SEBI and RBI, you need to first fix the responsibility of ensuring that the clearing of trades is possible. Today, you don't, of course, I would imagine NSD and CDSL will fall in line. But today, there is no talk of the depositories also opening at the same time as the stock exchanges. So, until and unless you have a situation where the stock trading is in between, contained on both sides ideally, by the banking timing, there is no logic for trying to open the trade beyond that. The second question is whether there is competition between exchanges. I'd like to point out a simple fact. Exchanges work, volumes in exchanges happen largely driven by arbitrage. So for example, when BSE and NSE both had different settlement periods, anybody who's been in the market at that time would have seen large amounts of shifts of trade happening between one exchange to the other. My argument would be that actually the fact that SGX opens before us actually provides perhaps some arbitrage opportunity, and rather than trying to kill or compete with that, you are better off letting that arbitrage grow, because that is what will drive the volumes and make the market even more liquid. In fact, I would argue that if you want to create a differentiation in the product, and this is perhaps for BSE, it's too late perhaps to look at the derivatives. Look at other kind of contracts. Look at contracts for differences. Look at, why can't we do other instruments on the exchange which will help to increase the assets that are available for the investor to trade, rather than trying to do this almost puerile, juvenile kind of activity where you say, I'll push the time back by 10 minutes. And what is to prevent the other guy from going back all the way? So, this is a no-win situation for anyone. It's completely barking up the wrong tree. And like I would reiterate, the fundamental question is, how do we settle a trade when you start before the bank opens and you end after the bank shuts?
Is it not odd, Anand, that all the organizations involved in this decision have actually come out and said it's a decision we've taken based on consensus opinion, when we've heard from two broking communities, the BSE Brokers Forum and ANMI, that it was a negative, when we're hearing from you that it is a negative? All three voices that we've heard, whether it's SEBI or whether it's the NSE or BSE, say the decision is based on consensus.
Well, this is the same kind of consensus that Bush had when he said that we should go into Iraq and that they were going to have a nuclear weapon the next day, I would imagine. It doesn't take too much to build consensus, and the only one you're willing to listen to is yourself.
Anish, what are you guys doing as from the broking community? Because it's one thing to debate this subject in the media, another to say that we have done a poll and most of our members are against it, and quite another to go and actively take it up with the exchanges and say, guys, we don't like it, we don't want it, so why are you doing it? Perhaps you should rethink. Is there any kind of proactive step that all the brokers who we have interacted with in the last 48 hours are trying to do between themselves, or is this just going to be a media debate and just that?
No, I think media is certainly one medium where it's being explained, it's being urged to the powers to be. But I don't think so. This issue is now restricted to the privately owned exchanges. It's gone much beyond that. We have seen MPs writing letters to the finance minister. I think somewhere it will have larger repercussions, and I think the entire political angle comes into play, because, as I said, It is not about certain high-end investors, brokers, or investment banks, or mutual funds, or insurance companies. It's about the other unorganized smaller players. A common man is getting impacted. And this government has been elected on the platform of Aam Aadmi, common man. And here is a step which goes against that man. And this is not going to be restricted here by just a few forums talking about it. I think it's now the issue has snowballed, in my opinion, to much larger level. I mean, there is a finance minister who will have to answer these questions. That why are you inconveniencing someone with a system which was working well? What was it that you're not able to achieve that you're now trying to achieve? And just because someone wants to make better killing in terms of profits, that doesn't mean you upset the apple cart. Why can't a Reserve Bank of India start functioning at 8 a.m.? Let's have a 24/7 check clearing system. Why not? Why Parliament can't start functioning at 8:30 a.m.? I mean, these are the kind of questions. If you want to begin the charity, let's begin at home. These are the tough questions, which in my opinion, right up to finance minister or probably even the prime minister will need to answer.
Aside from the human element of it, Anish, do you fear there is a systemic or technical problem over here where a lot of the problems, as Anand pointed out, are not in place? They weren't for Friday and they will not be for 4th of January. And God forbid you open up with a global market that's tanking and you potentially have a huge cut on the market. Are systems in place for that kind of a system, for that kind of a start?
I think we have to understand how this market functions. It's not that people come on 9:55, open their offices and hey, the trading begins. There is a set of preparation that happens. There are systems, there are checks and balances, there are bank balances which are taken, credits being given to each client, and obviously there's research being done, there's a news analysis which happens, which takes good 2.5, 3 hours. So anyway, people are starting mentally and physically preparing for this market way before the market opens. And I think this was just the perfect timing we were opening. So certainly not. I don't think so the systems are ready for this, and it's a step in the wrong direction. There's no second thought on that.
Anand, do you think this issue is big enough to engage the attention of New Delhi, the finance ministry, or are investors too small an interest group for the government to try and resolve this situation amicably between exchanges, regulators and market participants?
Well, actually, then I don't see what the issue is, because as Anish pointed out, I am also at a loss to understand who is exactly pushing for it. So if the exchanges have just decided unilaterally to extend the time, they can equally well unilaterally decide to bring it back, and that would be the end of it. There is just, like I said, first of all, for any action, there should be an explanation as to what that action expects to achieve. And here we have a situation where somebody just wakes up in the beginning of the day and says, oh, 9:55, 9:55 not good enough, let's make it 9:45. And the next guy reacts saying, okay, let's make it 9, because, that's where we can go up to. So it's, is it important enough? I don't know. The broking community is reasonably dispersed across the geography of the country, as well as reasonably dispersed in terms of market share, not to be able to necessarily come together. But I can tell you there is a reasonable amount of effort being put in terms of negotiation with the exchanges by the communities, trying to make representations and presentations saying that, look, it is not the most rational thing to do.
Thank you, gentlemen. Great points from both of you. We appreciate you coming in and talking about it. I think at the end of the day, as someone pointed out, it reeks of being an undemocratic decision. Let's take a break on